You can just feel in people's words that they're being inauthentic, especially in men.
Oof.
You can tell by a man's voice whether what he's speaking he believes in or not.
And I think this is huge. The voice is just a vehicle through which energy flows and is expressed. And so the voice is a literal representation of the alignment in your body and how your energy is actually going from emotions to words. That feeling of conviction and energy is exactly why.
How our intuition becomes very heightened is by listening to it. So when you hear bullshit, you speak up about it. You don't allow yourself to fall for whatever they're saying.
When it comes to listening to your intuition, it starts small. Someone is telling you something that doesn't feel quite right. It feels like a feather. Comes down, it's like tickles you. You feel that? Doesn't feel quite right. If you don't listen to that one, then it becomes a brick.
What happens oftentimes, people feel a feather and they feel a brick. They don't do anything. And then the Mack truck comes in where it's like inevitable, very painful. And then they're shell shocked. Women fall in love with what they hear. Men fall in love with what they see. Oftentimes what we see is more of an objective truth than what we hear. That's why words are cheap and actions aren't. But this is one thing that women have that is more of an advantage than what men may have.
Every second of my day was filled with something that wasn't me. It was literally podcast on cue, songs lined up. When I went in the shower, I had music or podcast playing. I was like hyper productivity, hustle, grind mode. But what we're just inviting you to do, if you struggle with exactly what we're talking about, is create more space in your day to hear your own voice. This is truly where the breeding grounds for intuition are. Welcome back to Listen Before Love. We are back again, reporting live from a brand new podcast studio.
In our home.
This one's in our home. This is smack dab in the middle of Cam's office and my office. So we literally meet in the middle like two little Roombas going to the home base to record these episodes. And it is awesome. So we hope y'all like it. You may notice some little Easter eggs behind us, like the Listen Before Love logos over here and the Great Morning Sun over here. That is for our gratitude community. And not to flex, but I'm pretty sure this is the highest consciousness collection of books in human history in a podcast studio. And so please enjoy. You may notice some Easter eggs floating around here, such as our Hawkins shelf over yonder, which informs how we see relationships in many ways. But I am so excited. Thank you for tuning into our inaugural podcast studio episode. This is where you will be seeing our beautiful show from this moment forward.
This just feels like the next chapter.
Yeah.
You know, it's like the next level for Listen Before Love, the next level for how we can make our impact in the world we've always wanted to make.
Yeah.
It's all just unfolding perfectly. It's all happening for us. And I'm so excited to bring the Listen Before Love audience to our home.
Yes. Yeah. I know y'all have been on this journey with us, but this was an incredible step in our journey, a big investment in ourselves, in our show, in all of our communities that we've launched. And so we are just living on cloud 9 these days. And we could not be happier to have all of you and be able to bring you along this mystical, magical journey. So thank you once again for being here with us, for rocking with us, for sending us DMs, comments, all of the good stuff. We would not be sitting in these beautiful chairs without you. So thank you, y'all. The last thing I'll say before we jump right in is that I really wanted this podcast studio to feel like a mix of Hogwarts, your favorite college professor, and masculine and feminine energy, which you know that is the basis for my coaching on high achieving women, to help them find and nurture love. So I am so thrilled on how it turned out. And if you guys think anything about it or if it reminds you of anything, please let us know because we're just so excited. So let's jump right in. We've got a juicy one for y'all today. We are going to be talking about accountability in relationships. This is specifically inspired by a DM that I received a couple of months ago from someone who said that her partner would use spiritual concepts such as the fact that everyone is a mirror to your own insecurities or wounds, and you're responsible for those wounds, healing them, seeing them, finding them, letting them pass through your body, but as a way to somewhat scapegoat accountability. And right when we got this DM, I was like, wow, That's definitely a higher level conversation. So it doesn't feel right to talk about in maybe episode 2. But now that we're here and y'all have been on this journey with us, let's get into it. So before we jump in, I wanted to share something pretty funny because we were watching a documentary for the second time just the other day. Last year, we'd watched a documentary on something called Twin Flames Universe. Now, this is a little wild if you know the story, but it's almost as if these people are like the shadow version of Cam. It was a mind blowing. And we're watching this documentary and I'm like, oh my God, wait, why are they kind of like the villain versions of us? And it was wild. I don't know how you felt about it, baby, but that's why we're watching it again. Any thoughts on it so far, baby?
Well, we watched it about a year ago, right?
Yes.
The first time before we developed our online presence, before we started these communities, before we really scaled things to the level of which they are now, which we're very, very proud of. And back then, it didn't hit as close to home as it does now when they say certain things, because what they're saying, oftentimes verbatim, is exactly what we've said before. This is the one thing.
Yeah.
Everything we say is coming from a place of self-empowerment.
Right.
Everything they're saying is coming from a place of manipulation.
Yeah.
And one of the main guys there, Jeff, I believe, Shalia, Jeff and Shalia, the two couples there, are the couple. Jeff is oftentimes the more active talker of the group, and he believes he's the second coming of Jesus Christ. And so everyone in that community is supposed to bow down to him as he's the master, and he calls himself that often. Mm-hmm. And so by doing so, he teaches these certain exercises and certain belief systems that are actually good belief systems to have, but he tweaks them so that it feeds into them praying and getting on their knees for him.
Yeah.
And so that's why it really feels like the shadow version. But we're watching some things and we see clips of them speaking. We're like, oh my gosh, I think I've said that exact same thing.
It was
but
surreal.
I'm like, it's being used in a way that's twisted for darkness. And I think this is why so many people fall into a cult or fall into a religion that doesn't serve their highest growth, is because they can feel the truth in the statements. They can feel the presence of, let's call it the creator, God, source, whatever it may be. They feel that when they're in the house of worship or whatever it is they're going through. And they can't forget, they can't ignore that feeling. And the way that feeling is currently happening in the house of which it's being taught to them, they're taught, oh, you must believe everything we stand for because you feel it inside.
Right.
That is the difference. That is what Jeff and Shalia are trying to convey. They're really, planning on creating a cult-like sanctuary, if you want to call it that, but kind of work camp for their people to work for them in a way that just doesn't, of course, feel aligned. And it seems like that chapter where all cults go to, where they go off grid and then terrible stuff happens. Yeah. It feels like that's coming, but they're able to do so because all of us have this innate feeling when we feel truth, or when we hear truth, when we see truth, when we there's this knowing within us. And people like to take advantage of that feeling and manipulate others through it. It's just wild to see that happening through the lens of people that are doing very similar work that we are, but using it to, like we said, manipulate, using it to divide and conquer, using it to maximize profit in all ways.
Right.
Extract is the best word probably for that, where we're quite the opposite. We're like, no. You do your own thing. This is all self-empowerment for you to understand. Yeah. And so it's very good to see someone doing it poorly, doing it in the wrong way, so we can be very clear with our messaging. We can be very clear in exactly what we're doing to make sure everything we do is in accordance with the light. Yeah. It is for their highest growth. It is based in a place of love. Right. So it's just fascinating. It feels like we have a template of what not to do going forward. Yeah. Which is awesome.
And we'll bring you into this even more so. So the group that they lead is called Twin Flames Universe. And the whole idea is based on the spiritual concept of twin flames. And in this dynamic, there is a runner counterpart and there is a chaser counterpart. And the separation of the twin flames, which is a part of the spiritual concept, is really where they're taking advantage of people, because in some of these cases, they are telling people, well, this is your twin flame and you're just in separation and you have to do everything in your power to get them back. So people are literally getting thrown into prison, getting restraining orders against them, stalking people because of these teachings that are basically saying, oh, hey, even though you think you're in separation from your twin flame, that just means you aren't trying hard enough. Not that it's not the right person. And they guarantee what they call harmonious union as a result of their communities, which led to the craziest plot twist ever, which was they had 95% women in this community, and they ended up somewhat forcing people to transition their gender identity in order for there to be a divine masculine with the divine feminine. So it's a wild story. We just wanted to give you the context so that you know exactly what we're talking about. But one of the techniques that they are very known for using, I would call this a pillar technique, is something called the mirror exercise. This is why we're talking about them in the context of this episode, because the concept of everyone around you being a mirror is something that Cam and I talk about often. I've written about it many times and I will stand by it 100%. It is absolutely true. But just as anything can, any neutral tool can be used for the darkness or for the light. So the mirror exercise, according to Jeff and Shalia and this cult called Twin Flames Universe, which by the way is just a Facebook group.
Which is wild.
Honestly, that's insane. It is literally just a Facebook group, but wow. The mirror exercise is basically the first step is identifying the upset. So let's say that Cam ignored me. So Cam ignored me and it hurt my feelings. Step 2 is that you change all of the words to put it back on yourself. I ignored myself and I hurt my feelings. The third step is to ask yourself, is it true? But here's the plot twist. They tell you the answer is always yes. So the answer is always that you hurt yourself. You ignored yourself, okay? And then the last step is give yourself what you're seeking externally. So give yourself the attention that you feel you didn't get, or the love, or the light, or whatever you feel like you're not getting, you give it to yourself. Now, on its face, walking through this exercise, you think to yourself, that doesn't sound too bad. All right, well, let's just bring it back to that third step where it's, is it true? Hint, the answer is always yes. Let's put this into an abusive context where, let's say, the two overlords, Jeff and Shalia, are basically trying to get you to do something, and they're making you not only feel incredibly bad, but they're forcing your hand in certain areas. They could easily use this tool as they're teaching it to abuse people and convince them that they're abusing themselves. That's what the tool will tell you if you use it the way that they're saying. So I had to just bring up this tool because if you were to look at parts of this, it can be very helpful. So the concept of a mirror, meaning that every person you talk to is just a reflection of parts of yourself. So when I am with Cam as my love and the person I spend the most time with, he reflects myself back to me. And this happens every day in ways that are big and small, ways that show me when he says something and it hurts my feelings and what is it within me that had my feelings hurt, and then I get to explore that. And the concept of a mirror is incredibly beautiful, but it can be used for abuse, which leads me to the conversation. This is the whole spirit of the DM that I received a couple of months ago, because she basically said she had a partner that would use concepts such as, well, I didn't actually hurt you. It's just a mirror of things you need to look at to avoid or escape accountability for his actions. And I want to talk about that today because accountability in relationships, especially if you're using advanced personal growth or spiritual topics to avoid accountability, is something that I feel many smart, high-achieving people have maybe tried to do or get away with in the past. So what comes up for you when I say this, my love?
People are so smart that they find a way to rationalize to themselves something that's more convenient as opposed to what's actually aligned with their highest growth. And so I see this all the time where people would rather get a diagnosis to label them as something, whether it's anxious attached or depressed or whatever extreme you want to take it as. They want to be able to put themselves in a box and be like, I'm this. Cool.
Right.
I'm just going to stay here now for the rest of my life. And if anyone ever try to change me or ask about it, I'll just tell them that label. And I'm good. It's fine. People do that to themselves oftentimes. And what they do to others is the mirror exercise. I see this all the time, especially in the spiritual community, right? It's people not wanting to take accountability for them being a shitty person around things. It's the ultimate definition of spiritual bypassing, where you utilize certain language. This is the entirety of the Twin Flames Universe cult. They're using words that are actually legit, and they're tweaking them to fit a certain narrative to help others conform to whatever they want. I see this all the time, whether it's on that level of cult-like or just in relationships. And it's so sad to see, but this is what I'd ask oneself, right? If you have a boyfriend or girlfriend that you feel as if is saying things to you like, oh, that's just a reflection of you, that could be the truth. Oftentimes it is the truth, but we need to objectively look at them. Look at, is that a person that is known, or you know them as being someone who's very accountable to themselves? Has there been a time where they've reflected something onto you that you told, hey, maybe this is something, did they take that advice well? Are they actively on their growth journey themselves? Or does it simply feel like it's just a one-sided growth experiment where they can do nothing wrong, they're already fully healed, they're already fully enlightened, and you are the ones with the problem? And even if they mistreat you, even if they cross your boundaries, even if they abuse you to some extent, for some reason, that's never their fault. If that's the case, they're not actually healed, they're not actually enlightened. They have just found different words to keep the same poor, fear-based habits that they've developed probably since their childhood. So I see this all the time. And the real truth is, you know it. Just in your heart, you'll know if someone says something to you, whether that feels true or not. And it's really just embodying that initial gut reaction you get upon when this person is trying to manipulate you because it's convenient for them to do so they don't have to change themselves. They don't have to look in the mirror themselves. Or if it's genuinely, oh man, maybe this is about me. Maybe he wasn't actually ignoring me. Maybe he didn't respond in 10 minutes, and therefore it triggered something from my past. And then I created a story that caused me to be angry and to feel like I was being avoided and feel like I was being left alone, feel like I was being, forgotten. And so I became angry. I became this, oh, you ignored me. That's also true. That can happen often, but that doesn't seem to be the case in situations like this. If you see a pattern of people refusing to take any responsibility, it's probably them refusing to look in their mirror. So it's easier to tell others to look in theirs.
Ooh.
How's that resonate with you? Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I honestly think that this is the conversation that stops a lot of people we know here in Austin from going to their next level.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Because the amount of people who want to tell others what to do when they're not actually taking their own advice can be felt. It's literally a felt embodiment. This is the difference between, and this applies to everything, love. Like, have you ever had somebody who loves to give you advice, but their life is falling apart? It's like, what is this? It's easier to go outside of yourself and to give advice to others or to nitpick others than to turn that mirror onto yourself and say, wait, what about this situation is triggering me to want to tell this person what they should do? What advice am I giving that I'm not taking? And when you start asking that question, things get real interesting. And that's where the real growth begins.
Well, let's talk about one of the more popular jobs in the Austin community that we're in.
Let's talk about
It's a coach, right?
Yeah.
All a coach really is an external mirror.
Yep.
That's all it really is. It's someone you can ask questions that are viewing you objectively, more objectively than you can see yourself in that moment, to give you tangible, oftentimes technical feedback to help you improve.
Right.
This is the problem. This is why there's so many broke, struggling coaches, is because you can try to market your services as much as you'd like. You can try to say the right things on camera, on Instagram, and all those other things. But if they don't feel as if you are embodying the messages that you're speaking, no one will resonate with you. And that's why so many people are struggling. They're not embodying what they're speaking. And the only attention they are receiving from people, oftentimes it feels like the blind is leading the more blind. So that is what I see over and over again. The same people teaching and preaching certain messages, simply by looking at them, you're like, oh, you don't follow that.
Right.
And sometimes it's as obvious as like a dating coach who's been like chronically single their entire life.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's people trying to tell you get your health in order, but you're obviously not doing that. But then it gets a little bit more complex, and it takes actually somewhat knowing the person or seeing them in person to feel them out more. But you can just feel in people's words that they're being inauthentic, especially in men.
Oof.
You can tell by a man's voice whether what he's speaking he believes in or not.
And whether, and I think this is huge, whether or not he lives it. Because if it's just like anything with reps, if you're living what you're speaking, it comes easily. It comes with conviction. It comes with the confidence of someone who lives what they're speaking. And that's why a lot of the people in this bucket, and this also applies to relationships too, they'll almost have like an agitation or hesitation, or their voice will be lower because they don't live the words.
A billionaire, a legit billionaire, does not have to try to convince anyone to take their advice when it comes to money.
Exactly.
There are people knocking down the door to learn. Same as someone who's absolutely ripped, jacked at the gym. He is the walking billboard for his services. You can see there's evidence that is irrefutable that they know what they're doing.
Right.
That oftentimes, especially when it comes to mindset, because you can't see it and feel it, people don't make that same connection. But if you really were to ask yourself, am I embodying, whether it's what I'm speaking or what I know is best for me that I refuse to speak? That's a big one too. If I'm doing that, I guarantee you're going to live a life you love.
Yeah.
And whatever your services are, whether you are a coach, whether you are a videographer, whether you are any type of art, anything you do in the world, if you're about that life, truly, you're not going to have a problem.
Yeah. Because people can feel it. Because like we were talking about the voice, right? The voice is just a vehicle through which energy flows and it is expressed. And so the voice is a literal representation of the alignment in your body and how your energy is actually bubbling over, going from emotions to words. That feeling of conviction and energy is exactly why you, with less than 800 followers on Twitter, have had multiple clients pay you anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000. When we have people who have hundreds of thousands of followers who they may have bought, not being able to make a sale. Why is that? Because you have conviction and because you actually live the words you're saying. And this is where it's really fun because there's two of us here and we keep each other very honest. And I would tell you if he doesn't live what he preaches, everything that he says, he lives. He tells the truth better than anyone I've ever seen. He tells the truth when it's so inconvenient that it in some cases has blown up some of our relationships and friendships because he felt so compelled to tell the truth. Like he lives that. He is so good at setting boundaries. I learn from him every single day at setting boundaries. He is so good at embodying his emotions, not cowering down or people pleasing or suppressing his voice. He truly, everything we talk about on this podcast, he does or is actively working on every day. I feel like that's just your mindset. You are like the definition of someone with a growth mindset who lives what they are speaking. There's not one area I can think of where you are out of integrity. And that is why with less than 800 followers, you've gotten multiple one-on-one clients because when people meet you, they can feel you. And that's why you will never struggle with money.
Hey, yo.
Not to gas you up, but that's what I'm talking about. Dang. And you felt, when you listened to me say that, you felt the truth in my voice saying that to you because I'm telling the truth here and you can feel that. That applies to everything. So why are we bringing this up? Because Cam said a while ago that in relationships, you can feel when your partner is saying something to you where they're avoiding or scapegoating. But do you listen to yourself? Do you listen to the feeling that you got that's saying, red alert, they're not telling the truth? Do you listen to it? This is where, perfect example, we love reality TV. We watch Married at First Sight. There was a moment in the current season in Chicago where one of the women on the show had a feeling that her partner was cheating. She couldn't confirm it, but she just had a feeling. Turns out that she was right. She was right. This happens all the time. The intuition that we all have and are blessed with comes through in these moments when you can feel that someone is not living in integrity, in alignment. This is the same thing that happens when you're talking to someone, whether it's your partner or anyone else, who gives you advice that they are not taking. And that split second where you have your mind arguing with your felt sense in the body, and then we choose the mind, is where we lose. When in reality, if we just recalibrated and said, actually, I felt something in my body that I am going to pay attention to, and I am going to look for patterns. We talked about this in a prior episode. I'm not saying we can't give someone a break sometimes. If this happens 3 or more times, it is a pattern. And that's how you can spot it. If you feel that your partner is doing this scapegoating of accountability, not once, but twice, but 3 times, that means there's a pattern in their behavior. And they are not turning that mirror back to them, and you are not going crazy. Do not gaslight yourself. You felt it and it's real, and you have evidence now. Feelings are evidence. We've just been convinced that they are not. We've been convinced to only pay attention to what we can see, to what our mind can comprehend, when the real wisdom is within us that we ignore almost on a daily basis.
I absolutely love that. We heard this a million times where women fall in love with what they hear, men fall in love with what they see. Oftentimes, what we see is more of an objective truth than what we hear. That's why words are cheap and actions aren't. But this is one thing that women have, I think, right out the gate, that is more of an advantage than what men may have, and that is a heightened sense of intuition. So yes, they're more likely to fall for the salesman. Mm-hmm. And also, if they step more into their divinity, they can curate a human experience where their entire life is based off of a feeling, is based off of their gut intuition. And when they do that, when they honor that, and how it grows for men and for women, how our intuition becomes very heightened is by listening to it, going through with it. So when you hear bullshit, and you see bullshit, you speak up about it.
Right.
Not saying you got to confront them about it, but I'm saying you no longer do what they want to do because you honor yourself, understanding that what they want to do may not be aligned with who they actually are.
Right.
You don't allow yourself to fall for whatever they're saying.
Right.
And so I think this is an incredible opportunity because we started this conversation, and we'll go back to it around the mirror exercise. Mm-hmm. But the solution to that problem that people fall into, and every other problem, is not fully embodying their intuition.
Yeah.
Or when they do have a feeling, going against it. If everyone in that, twin flames universe had a heightened intuition, number one, they wouldn't be in there. And number two, the next thing that comes out of those people's mouths, they'd be like, oh, that just feels wrong. I'm not going to conform. I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to change all the crazy things they're having them do. They would immediately leave. And so the number one problem for women and men is of a lack of ability to listen to ourselves.
Yeah.
The lack of ability to follow that feeling. And if we can instill that back into both genders, the game will change. It'll a lot less marriage problems, a lot less friendship problems, a lot less relationship problems in general, and therefore lead to a much happier, healthier world.
So if we just determined that it's people not listening to their intuition that cause all their problems. So we've said this before, when it comes to listening to your intuition, it's really funny because it starts small, right? So like the very first time that this happens to you and you feel like someone is telling you something that doesn't feel quite right, it feels like a feather, it comes down, it's like tickles you, and it's like, you feel that? Doesn't feel quite right. If you don't listen to that one, then it becomes a brick, okay? They say something doesn't feel right, and now there's a brick thrown into your reality. And usually that's something somewhat contentious, like let's say a guy, let's use a relationship example. I'll actually use the example from Married at First Sight because it's a perfect example. The feather in this case was her getting a text message that confused her. She got a text message. This is, give you some context. She was married for the first time, never met this man, met him at the altar. And from day one, she was not into him. We've talked about this couple in a prior episode on how much should you share in early dating if you want the whole scoop. She was not into him. Both parties are struggle busting through this 8-week marriage, okay? And the first thing that starts to happen is that he sends her a text that says, "You look so damn fine. I want to eat you up." This is when they're having marital problems. Not that face. I'm not reading your text to me, okay? Come on now, Ayo. So
I'm like, you just look at your phone?
I know. Sorry, I'm reading my text yet again from the last episode. So she gets this text and she's like, what the hell? Because they're going through problems. It's like late at night. It's 9 p.m. He's out for the night. And she immediately has an alarm go off. That was the feather. Now she listened to it. She knew that something was going on here. And the thing with intuition is if there's something to it, it stays. It has staying power. If you are reacting to something out of your past wounds or trauma, it usually is something that, just like fight or flight, your nervous system gets activated, you deal with it, you understand it, and then you come back down. But intuition is different. Intuition has staying power. So this woman, Michelle, noticed that she couldn't get her mind off the text. She couldn't stop thinking about it. She couldn't stop talking about it. She brought it up to him multiple times. That text wasn't for me, was it? It was meant for someone else. Are you talking to other women? She had all this in her head and she brought it to him. Every time she brought it to him, he lied. Every time he said, no, I'm not. Next conversation. Well, actually, I am talking to this woman that I did talk to on Tinder, but I wasn't texting her. And then as she kept really going at him and asking him direct questions, he started revealing more and more of the truth that he had been hiding the entire time. Now, the brick of this situation for Michelle was when she started to put together some timelines and was like, wait a second. He was out with another wife on the show during this time. And that's just odd to me. Our names are Michelle and Madison. And he probably meant to send it to her. But this was big, right? Because this was an accusation against another wife on the show, which has never happened before. That literally means a pair was cheating within the couples. So she meets with the girls, tells them all this stuff. She starts talking about it. Madison storms off. That was the brick. Madison randomly, the girl, who she thought was cheating on with her husband, just gets up and leaves the room. And it was weird because it was like, wait, why is she so activated? That's the brick. The Mack truck is what ended up happening at the end, where they all realized it all came out and they admitted Michelle was right about every single detail of this. That text was meant for Madison. They were cheating. They were having an emotional relationship, apparently nothing else, but who knows. And the Mack truck was literally, her being hit with this conversation where David and Madison come to her, spill the tea and say, yeah, actually it was true. We did have a relationship. We were cheating. But she got it from the feather.
And in this case, Michelle did it right.
Yes.
What you're saying, like the whole time, she had multiple conversations with her man that was like, hey, something's going on. I have this feeling I need to address. Now, what happens oftentimes, not talking about this show, is people feel a feather.
Yep.
And they feel a brick. And they don't do anything. And then the Mack truck comes in where it's like inevitable.
Yep.
Very painful. And then their jaws on the floor because of it. They don't know what to do. They're shell shocked.
Yep.
And that's oftentimes the experience we all have once or twice in our life that changes our lives.
Yeah.
That it's like that earth shattering moment where everything changes after that.
Yeah.
And so what I believe what you believe, is that oftentimes in life when those things are happening, there is a sequence of events that happen prior, but you know that something's out of alignment.
Yep.
It's not just the Mack truck all of a sudden.
No. Yeah.
And that goes for many different things, not just cheating in a relationship. It's pretty much all of life.
Yeah.
And it's our lack of ability to trust our own intuition that puts us in that space to allow it to unravel and unfold to get that Mack truck. And so if you want less Mack truck hit moments in your life, start listening, start feeling into the feathers.
Exactly. That's a beautiful way of saying it, baby, because I walked you through a woman who listened, felt the feather, addressed the feather, and then everything that happened after that vindicated her. It made her feel actually good. It made her feel validated. It made her feel like, oh, you know what? I saw this coming. I didn't just bury this. And I want to take like the opposite, which is what we usually see people do, and that what in some cases I've done way back in the past, is that let's say you get a text message that's weird and you're like, this wasn't intended for me, weird feeling. And you just didn't say anything. This is what most people do. Most people act with a lot of indirectness, and I understand because conflict is really difficult and sticky and hard. But if you see something that makes you feel in your gut, like, that doesn't feel right to me, the way that you break this pattern and the way you strengthen your intuition is by speaking in the moment. You get that text, and just like she did, you bring it up. And when you're in a conversation with someone like this, I mean, this is wild. When we're watching the show, we could tell he was lying. You can feel it. You can feel it. Even if they're not telling you the truth, you can feel the truth in someone's body, in their body language, and how he was sitting on the couch, and how he was slumped over, and how he wasn't making eye contact, and how he was like avoiding the conversation at all costs, scheduling it in times that were like at 11 p.m. for her, where she's like about to fall asleep, essentially. All these little details help you understand when you're in the moment with someone if you're right or you're wrong.
And let me add something onto that, because relationships aren't a courtroom.
Yeah.
You don't need sufficient evidence to ask questions. Now, if none of this behavior from this guy happened, but she still had this gut feeling it was coming up, she has every right to bring it up.
Yeah.
This is the thing where it gets a little tricky. Because if you're someone with a lot of unprocessed trauma from the past, and you've been cheated on before, even the slightest ignorance, if you want to say like he stayed 2 hours late from work one day and actually just went to the bar with some friends and wasn't with some girl, whatever, because it happened to you in the past, you may look at that and be like, I think you're cheating. Right. That's oftentimes what's happening for a lot of relationships. That's happened for me in the past. Like there's been many, many times where we've been accused of things we haven't done through no fault of our own. It's a past pattern that they experienced that has been unprocessed that goes on to this relationship.
Right.
That happens a lot. And also, we oftentimes get the feeling something's happening before tangible evidence comes into our life that we can actually talk about. And so if you want to come to someone when there is just this feeling, there is a way you can have that conversation without it being accusatory.
Yep.
Because if there's no evidence that you know of so far, it literally is just a feeling. That is all you need to ask questions. And there is a way you can be like, hey, like very kindly, I just have this feeling that something's going on. Is there anything you'd like to share? Like you can open the floor in a way that really stops you from going crazy in your own mind, waiting for some evidence to then kind of get them and have that hard conversation, whatever it is, to be accusatory. That feeling is all you need in the courtroom of relationships.
Yes.
But honor that. Make sure it's portrayed in a healthy, loving way, especially if there's no evidence. And really just embrace how you feel in all situations. And all this wouldn't happen. Now, all this being said, this is a fantastic, fantastic example. Back to the mirror exercise.
Mm-hmm.
What I see happen all the time is that because people are not in tune with their own body, are not in tune with that intuition, they allow for others to not reflect, but project something onto them that isn't true. Just like this person said with the mirror exercise, especially if they're more in the spiritual culture that's more embraced and embodied. They're just being manipulated in a way that is more acceptable with the right language, right terms, definitions, that they've been indoctrinated to believe is more around love and more around light, more about caring for it all. But it's pretty much their same toxic, abusive behaviors, just in new words. Does that resonate with you?
Well, yeah, of course. But I'm wondering, what advice would you give someone who's stuck in a loop like that? Like if there's someone out here listening who feels like they've been in a lot of relationships that the other person is constantly saying, oh, well, you did this wrong, or they have a hair trigger response, or this is actually your problem, or this is something that you need to look at, and this is something that it's reflected back to you. If you were in a relationship like that, or like, let's say I did that to you, what would you do?
I think I would start by saying, like, why do you feel as if this is coming through to you so strongly? Like, she'd be like, I make a bunch of mistakes. I'm not a perfect person. Probably a lot of things I do that make you feel a little annoyed, irritated. Why is this in particular something that's coming up for you so strongly? I fully apologize. I take full responsibility for my actions. Also, out of all the weird things I do, why is this standing out to you? That's what I would say. And if you are in a conscious relationship where they're open to actually changing, this would be a big tell if you put it back on them. Like, you could take full responsibility for who you are and how they feel, while also ask them, why do you think it made you feel that way? That's basically what I'm doing there. You can ask them from a place of love and curiosity and openness to get to know each other more. That allows for you, or allows for them to feel better because you take responsibility, while simultaneously help them in their journey to understanding why they got so aggravated, why they got so irritated around certain things.
Yeah.
So that's I guess what I would do. Again, I've never really been in that situation, thankfully.
Have you been in that situation with any kind of relationship, like a mentorship or in business? Have you experienced that before?
I've had a few people, very recently. I'm of a situation where I'm gaining momentum in my life, and therefore a lot of people around me, whether they are doing very, very well or lack thereof, are wanting to give me their 2 cents, right? And oftentimes when they say something, it doesn't feel right to me. And it's like, thank you, but like, no. And that's what I'm saying internally. Externally, depending on the person, depending on their openness, oftentimes, thank you for your advice. I'll definitely keep that in mind. But what I feel from them is they are projecting their own shit, their own limiting beliefs, their own scarcities onto me. And based upon what I am feeling into their level of readiness for me to put it back on them, determines how I respond. Oftentimes, the far far majority of advice people give you, especially unsolicited advice, is coming from a place of projection, not observation. And that's really what we're trying to determine here. Projection versus observation. So there are many different ways to react to that person in the moment, and you will intuitively know what feels right if you're more in tune with your emotions. It's also it's good to keep that in mind. It's like, of the information you have on this person giving you this advice, that may be deviation from truth, deviation from actually what's best for me, that's just a projection, is important to take into play when you view this person going forward. Give them all the grace and understand the world that they can also learn and grow, just like we have, just like how we project in the past and on things that we no longer would. They can also learn and grow. But also, if this same person is wanting to go into business with you, is wanting to become one of the people in your inner circle, is wanting to become a mentor, whatever it is, keep in mind that little tally you just made in your head about seem a little off.
Yeah.
Because oftentimes, the fallouts in relationships come from the feather, the brick, and the Mack truck, where the feather and the brick around who they are and what they do went unnoticed, or was noticed and not acknowledged. And because of that, the Mack truck hits and they steal a bunch of money, or they fail to do their part and the business fails, or relationship, oftentimes they just don't hold up their end of the bargain in a way that would actually feel best for both people, for each other's highest growth. And so that's what leads to toxic relationships. There's always signs. People aren't that great a salesman to always lie to you. You have this compass within you, this truth compass, that if you listen to, will not steer you wrong. And now everything's perfect. Everything in the past happened exactly how it was supposed to. And it was a lesson to potentially help protect you from something potentially even worse happening in the future, and definitely guide you on a path that's better for you and everyone around you, including that person. But that first starts by being honest with yourself when you get a unique feeling about someone and what they're saying. And so in this mirror exercise, what we're saying, if someone is projecting it back onto you, honor that. What is their tone of voice when they're saying that to you?
Big. Yeah.
Are they in fight or flight?
Or is it activated?
Are they being activated? Or are they being calm, healthy, in a way that feels divine? There are very, very few people that when something is brought to their attention, that is a shortcoming of theirs, if they're truly healed and if it's truly not a reflection of them, a reflection of others, very few people can actually really handle it in a way that feels very eloquent and feels right to you. Narcissists are great at taking that eloquently oftentimes, but in a way that feels right for you, that was actually their genuine response and genuine feelings, that's when you know. It all comes back to, I think, the internal feeling.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is a big one. This is a big one. And I personally hope that we're on a wave where the intelligence of the body and the signals of the body begin to be just as trusted, if not more so, than the signals of the mind. And, it's unique. I said this before, but I think it's worth reiterating that we were talking about the impact of past wounds, of trauma, of insecurities in the past that will bubble up and confuse you. And this is where I see a lot of women I know do this. I used to do this quite a bit. You'll have a reaction to someone and you can't differentiate between your own stuff and your intuition. And if that you're in that position and you question yourself and you go back and forth a lot on like, is this just a me thing or am I actually feeling this? It's basically just gaslighting your own self. And that's okay, because I've been there too very many times. That just comes with continuing the practices of creating space to know yourself and your own voice. The more you create space to know what your inner voice sounds like, the more clearly you can hear it. And we've said this in many different episodes, like taking space to literally give you the opportunity to know the voice, going on walks without headphones, going to sound baths, sitting on the couch. Cam, before this episode, was literally sitting on the couch, looking at the incense smoke floating up, doing absolutely nothing, just creating space for his mind to breathe, his mind to process, his mind to drain anything, his mind to wander. It's like we have, and I know when you're listening to this, it can be quite confronting. Trust me, I used to be this person years ago. Every second of my day was filled with something that wasn't me. It was literally podcast on cue and songs lined up. And when I went in the shower, I had music or podcast playing. I was like hyper productivity, hustle grind mode. But what we're just inviting you to do, if you struggle with exactly what we're talking about, is create more space in your day to hear your own voice. This is truly where the breeding grounds for intuition are. This is where we find it again, we rediscover it, and where we can practice listening to it and knowing what does my intuitive voice sound like versus my past stuff, trauma, insecurity, wound, baggage stuff sound like. Those voices have a distinct difference if you tune into them. And you can feel it in the body too. I know at this point, and we've had moments like this pretty often, if I ever have a moment where I can literally feel my heart start to beat very, very fast, and I can feel my nervous system go into fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. I can feel myself have this embodied reaction to something that's said in a calm way. That's my tell. That's when I know that this is not my intuition. This is something very deep that I don't even fully understand coming up in this moment. And if I just remember to breathe, I remember to put my hand on my heart, I don't run away, I allow myself to embrace the moment for what it is, and I just calm myself, put my feet on the floor, ground, then I can move through that moment and reprogram my inner nervous system response to these heightened moments. And these can be something as small, by the way, as Cam making a really tiny comment that makes me feel rejected, which shouldn't even make me feel rejected, but that's just my past stuff, right? That voice, I have now trained myself to understand what that voice feels like, because that voice feels triggered. That voice feels very like, ooh, hurt, wounded. Whereas the intuitive voice is a little whisper. Like, you feel that? That's what my intuition sounds like. She's just kind of like, don't know about that one. That's what my intuition personally sounds like. We're like, that didn't feel right. It's quiet. It's not loud. Quiet. So I don't know if that's helpful for anyone, but that's how I tell the difference between my voices.
It's helpful for me to reaffirm for myself to keep this going. One thing that came up for me as you were saying that was that reflection. heightens our ability to tell whether something is an observation or projection from someone else. More time within ourselves to feel into our own emotions, observe our own selves, allows us to observe others much more clearly. And the more we do that, these mirror exercises, when used in a manipulative, conformative way, will become very, very clear to us in that moment.
Yeah.
And then we can take on the best course of action for ourselves and our highest growth and the highest growth of everyone involved in that moment. So yeah, I'm very, very glad we touched on this. This really feels like the antidote, the answer to everything, right? It's just follow your gut, follow your intuition, trust yourself.
And cultivating a relationship with your own inner voice and cultivating a healthy gut, right? Because if you have a sick gut, that gut is not going to make the most reliable decisions. But we can work on creating a more healthy gut by doing exactly what we just talked about, creating that space, allowing yourself to hear your own voice, not having external stimuli roll throughout your day every second of the day. That's how we create a healthier gut. Looking at the things from the past, doing all of the work that we've talked about, journaling, understanding what is that dirt that's in grime that's caked onto our mirror that we just need to lovingly investigate. We need to explore and look under every rock and say, ooh, this felt weird and really kind of hurtful. Why? That's helpful self-inquiry. But there's a very real difference between self-inquiry, which can get you to the point of healthy gut, and abusive, forced upon you inquiry. This is a you thing and your problem and this. Very different story here. The more you do the helpful self-inquiry, the more you will immediately be able to tell when somebody is forcing their own scapegoat of accountability onto you.
And this is why we are the light version, the bright side of Jeff and Shalia, because we're telling you all the answers are within. And keeping that in mind, keeping that in our forefront, will guide us to the life we deserve, attracting the person we deserve.
Oh, I love it so much. I hope you enjoyed this beautiful episode. And thank you for being here with us in our new studio. We're so excited. Oh my gosh. And as a little reminder, if you could, it would so incredibly help our show if you hit the like button, hit subscribe, left a little comment. That engagement goes such a long way, longer than we even understood until we started doing this stuff. So thank you for being here. And if you want more from us, go into our other episodes or check the links below. See y'all. Love you so much.
Love y'all.
Bye-bye.